This is the On the Mark podcast, bringing you facts, opinions, and personal experiences from the outdoor industry.
I got the opportunity to shoot an AR-15. That was one of the funnest experiences that I've had.
It's pretty exciting. It's a big rush.
Presented by Sightmark, an industry leader in optics, bore sights, night vision, and more. Make your mark.
Welcome back to the On the Mark podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Hamilton. Today, joining me in the Sightmark studio, I have Cable Smith with Lonestar Outdoors Show. If you haven't listened to his podcast or his radio show, I encourage you to go do so. Find it. Cable, tell the people a little bit about your show and how you guys get started.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I certainly appreciate that, Jeff. Been doing this we just had our 600th episode, so been doing it a little while.
Damn,
and
no kidding.
I actually got a degree in radio, TV, and film.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, and so I wanted to do like on-air stuff, and I did for a little while. Then the economy went into the crapper.
Yeah.
I think it was, what was that, 2008, 2009, somewhere in there. And basically my boss was like, oh, I can't afford to pay you, which for like coming out of college, like for an on-air personality in Texarkana, Texas.
Right.
He couldn't pay me means like literally you were already paying me nothing.
Right.
Yeah. What's less than, I'll work for free. What do you want me to say?
Yeah.
So my wife and I moved back to North Texas, and I was like, man, one of my responsibilities there was, and I wanted to do sports talk. That was my goal. But in Texarkana, my boss was like, you need to host a weekly hunting and fishing show.
Yeah.
I was like, cool. I like to hunt and fish, and I just fell in love with it.
Yeah.
And so once I got like let go from that job, just because of the economy, we moved back here, and I was like, what am I going to do with my life now? And I could go back to the radio station in Dallas, which is where I was working when I left. But you know, you're a grunt, you're so low on the totem pole.
Yeah.
You're literally looking at the host there, like, how much longer till that person kicks the bucket so I can take their job, which is a morbid way to look at like.
That's the reality, though.
Yeah.
My degree was mass communications, and in that degree, I took a lot of courses on broadcasting and stuff like that. I learned really quickly that that's the reality. Is like you start at a broadcasting company, say radio, television, or whatever, and whoever's the top dog at that point, you got to be like, okay, he's like mid-40s.
Right.
He's looking at probably another 25 to 30 years before I get anything going for me. Yeah. And even at that point, like you came in new, there might already be a second person being prepped up into that position. So I'm very familiar with how that goes.
They're like, you don't want to work overnight weekend shifts? Well, somebody else does, so see ya,
Right.
So I was like, I don't want to go back to that and get back in line after I was gone for 10 months. So yeah, I was like, I really liked doing that outdoor talk show.
Yeah.
Just see if I can start my own. And at the time, podcasts didn't exist.
Right.
We would record our show and then put it on our website.
Yeah.
And then maybe like after a year, it was like, oh, we can put it on iTunes.
Yeah.
And then a couple of years later, here comes Spotify.
Yeah.
So, by default, it became a podcast, but it's still on the radio. We have like 20 stations across Texas that air it every weekend. But yeah, so that's kind of how I got started in this game, and was able, one thing that I was concerned about, like, was the fact that now anyone can have a podcast.
Right.
I was like, God, this is make it so competitive, but it's been great, not only for me, but I think for everybody.
Right.
Because you can pick and choose what you want to listen to.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
you can listen to it at your own convenience. You don't have to wake up at 8 a.m. and listen to it on the radio every week. So.
Well, and for the podcaster, podcasts are becoming wildly popular for a couple of reasons. Some of the main ones are, right now, all of these platforms that are like hosting podcasts or allowing podcasts on their platforms are starving for those content. So they're not regulating it as heavily as they would, let's say, Facebook or Instagram.
God. Yeah.
Like, your other social media platforms are being so freaking stifled that you have to watch what you say or they eliminate you. Podcasting, you kind of have the freedom, right?
Oh, yeah.
So that's why I think a lot of the audience, too, are kind of going towards there. Because it's like, hey, do you want, like, real information that's, like, an actual, like, somebody's opinion that's not being, suppressed or something like that?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think Joe Rogan's been so instrumental in, like, keeping the First Amendment.
Yeah.
Like, are we seeking the truth,
right.
or are we going to let Facebook and Instagram dictate everything that we think is true?
Exactly.
So for people like him to have the platform that he does and seek the truth and have those long form conversations, I think, it's great for all of us.
Yeah.
So,
well, and like, even if you look back at like him seeking the truth about, what social media is saying, he's even going as far as like calling out news media whenever they lie about what he's doing. He just got on
Joe's eating horse paste.
Yeah.
Joe's like, can we cuss on this podcast?
Yeah.
Oh, Joe's like, fuck you.
Yeah.
The doctor prescribed it for me.
Yeah.
It's been dosed 4 billion times throughout human history. Won a Nobel Prize in 2015.
Yeah.
It's absurd, but that's what and then CNN like doesn't even retract what they said. But he's like, I'm going to sue your asses.
No, what they do the same thing that any media will do. And 6 months from the time that they said it, they'll go back and issue a correction to any online articles.
Right.
But without making a statement, they'll just change the online article so that they eliminate it from existence. So you can never reference back to what they did.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was funny. Dana White, the head of the UFC, put on his Instagram the other day. He's like, I'd like to thank Dr. Joe Rogan for the recipe to beat COVID.
Yeah.
He was like, I tested negative in 5 days with Joe's cocktail, which should be provided to everyone that wants to seek alternative treatment, or avoid going to the hospital. I mean,
it is maddening to me. And we don't even have to we could spiral into hours long
of COVID,
of COVID and how it's being treated. But it is maddening to me that as a society, we have accepted that the treatment for COVID was go home and come back if you're about to die.
Right.
That is insane. Maddening.
I was listening to the latest Joe Rogan podcast with Dr. Peter McCullough on the way up here.
Yeah.
And he's a Texas guy.
Yeah.
He's the most published heart and kidney surgeon in history.
Yeah.
Right? So he's got all the skins on the wall.
Yeah.
And he's like, Joe, I didn't want my patients to die.
Right.
So I'm like, every day, how do we treat this from infection day?
Right.
So that at day 14, you're not going on a ventilator.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's just like nobody wants. I mean, it's a complete failure by the medical field to.
Right.
They failed us, society. They don't seem to care.
Well, what's funny is I got COVID a couple of months ago and not vaccinated. I contracted COVID.
You're vaccinated now, better than any vaccine.
Oh, yeah, for sure. What's funny is people who, and my parents being one of them, were like, get vaccinated.
Yeah.
You're putting everybody at risk, And I had arguments with them about it.
Yeah.
And I was like, look, I'm not. I'm glad that you guys are.
Right. Oh, sure.
But I'm not.
Yeah.
But then I got COVID, and they're like, well, see? And I'm like, no, you don't understand. That was the plan.
Right.
I wanted to get it so that I could develop the antibodies for it. The survival rate's, phenomenal. I'm like,
so you just had it. I had it November of 2020.
Yeah.
I will test again for antibodies this week.
Yep.
As of a month ago, I still had antibodies.
Still had them.
So,
nice.
And my kids, this vaccinating kid stuff is such bullshit. My kids went back to school in August. Our whole family enrolled in this Texas health study just so we could see what COVID's really doing, long term, short term. My kids did not have COVID when my wife had it over the holidays last year.
Yeah.
They had COVID when they went back to school. They were so sick that we never knew they had COVID.
Yeah.
And then they got the antibodies test and they popped for sky high. I was like, oh my God. So,
Yeah.
I'm glad that they got it too.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, that's a whole rabbit hole that we could dive down.
Yeah.
Well, I'll follow.
You know what pisses me off in bringing it to hunting?
Yeah.
Is that I can't go to Canada. I've missed a bear hunt twice.
I heard
now.
that. Yeah.
I've been invited to come up to Saskatchewan and whitetail hunt.
Mm-hmm.
Can't do it.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the travel restrictions that they're imposing. I think on the way into work, I just read that they're doing some more. They're planning some more restrictions in certain. The blue states have already started to lock back down on stuff because of this new variant that apparently is the cold.
It's the least severe variant so far.
I mean, it's absolutely.
Yeah, next month it'll be another variant, and get your X number of booster shots. It'll never end. It's all money. That's what it is.
Yeah. But that's the thing. My mother just this last week got COVID.
And she's
vaccinated with a booster. Now she has an autoimmune deficiency, so she's the worst person you'd want to have it. So obviously I'm concerned about that. She's doing fine now, but my conversation with her was hey, listen, I know where we can go to get you ivermectin. I was like, do you want that? And she's like, well, it's not really proven in the medical community. Now she's a nurse. She's a retired nurse, but she nursed for 40 plus years in the ICU. And so now she's got, some connections to these doctors, and they're, telling her, X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, listen, I understand that's your opinion. But if your plan is to sit there with COVID in your house until you get on a ventilator and then go and look at something, that is the worst plan you can have. That makes zero sense.
That's what my mom did. It almost killed her. She was in the hospital for 30 days.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I wish, she's 66. I wish the vaccine was available for her before we all got COVID over the holidays. Mm-hmm. She spent Christmas and the holiday. COVID's real. It kills people, but it's usually older people.
Right. Well, and for me, it's like, I'm almost 30. I'm 29 now at this point. My wife, similar age. We have 2 kids, but we're planning to have more kids. Mm-hmm. And the truth is, the FDA's approval of the vaccine so far they have stated in there that birth defects and things of those natures, that study doesn't conclude until 2025.
Yeah.
And I'm like, look.
It's all rushed.
I'm like, look, I'm
You're the lab rat.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm not going to do it. Sorry, that is what it is.
Yeah, do it if it makes sense for you.
Yeah, exactly. But it sucks that they've restricted travel and stuff like that.
I'm pissed. That was a Vancouver Island black bear hunt, monster black bear there.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, and that was supposed to happen spring of, how long has COVID been going on? 2 years,
Think about it. I've had several people that do regular hunts out in Africa and stuff like that.
I've still been able to go to Africa. I went twice this year.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I went in February. We were the first group back into South Africa.
Yeah.
The bartender at the airport bar was like, Americans, I haven't seen you in a year.
Dude,
will you please have a hamburger? We're like, yo, we're hungry. Do you have cold beer? Yes, we have the coldest beer. Okay, sign us up. He's like, and then he just couldn't get over. He was like, I just can't believe you guys are back.
People don't understand the amount of revenue that those communities draw from tourism, with hunting, and photography is a big one.
Yeah.
But all that's been cut off for the last year and a half, 2 years.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And those communities are literally starving for people to come back in and just kind of revitalize everything they got going on by spending money there.
Yep.
Yeah, that's absolutely nuts. So in Africa, what'd you do over there?
In February, so that trip was canceled from 2020 because everything was locked down. So we went February, like I said, first group back in. It was so great. The animals, it was like they forgot what it was like to be persecuted.
Yeah.
So they weren't as wary. When I went back in July, it had all shifted back to normal. But they were just not as smart as they were usually.
Yeah.
But I shot a Cape buffalo in February, and one of the coolest hunts I've ever done in Africa was a fallow deer hunt in the mountains, which fallow deer are native to Europe.
Right.
We have them in Texas too, but if you want to shoot a fallow deer in Texas, it's like $4,500.
Right. Yeah.
In Africa, $500.
Dear Lord.
And it was mountain hunting. You're way up high. You're glassing, which is like a long 470-yard shot.
Wow.
Shooting from prone down at this animal that we bedded, and the stag finally got up after about an hour or two and decided he wanted to get a little drink and smoked him. It was awesome. But I love I think people have I certainly had this premonition, this idea that Africa was drive around in a Land Cruiser, see something on a flat plane, get out and shoot it.
Yep.
I was so glad that it wasn't like that.
Yeah.
And it's all spots. That has happened once, and I've killed 25 animals over there now.
Yeah.
One time we were driving back from we had just taken a warthog.
Yeah.
We were driving back to camp, and the tracker always sits in the high rack in the back of the Land Cruiser.
Yeah.
And he goes, and they tap the hood, and he's like, he sees something, and my PH gets out, and he's looking, he's like, that's the biggest mountain reed buck I've ever seen.
Oh, God.
I was like, well, what's a mountain reed buck?
Yeah.
I don't even know what this animal is.
Yeah.
And he's like, he's like right over there. I get my binos. He's like, if you want to shoot it, this would be the reed buck of a lifetime. And I was like, how much is it? He's like, $400. I was like, boom.
No question. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pass up.
And him and the other PH whose ranch it was, it was like an emotional moment for them. I think it's like our whitetail deer for them.
Right.
It's not one over there that gets a lot of love.
Yeah.
But in that area of South Africa on the Eastern Cape, it's like their animal that they grew up hunting with their dad.
Right.
And when they walk up on it and they're like, oh, this is so big. I'm like, it's the horns are 8 inches tall. this tiny thing. I'm like,
Yeah.
But to them, it was like
It's like this emotional.
They still
connection to
talk
them.
about this
Yeah.
hunt that we had, and
Really?
he was like, "Please get this thing shoulder mounted."
Yeah.
I was like, "Okay, well, it got Euro mounted." But I mean, I never entered it in the record books, but it was, I mean,
Yeah.
that quality of an animal.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, so circling back here locally, it's deer season right now.
Yeah.
I've been listening to, several of your episodes.
Oh,
and
then
what
you
I
just heard me bitching about how.
I just heard you bitching about getting pimples and everything else.
Yeah, dude.
Walk me through what's going on.
Yeah, so, the first opening morning, I had this non-typical buck that I don't like naming deer, but sometimes you just name deer, and maybe I do like it then. I don't know. But he was this non-typical, had like an 8-point rack, but then every point had all this palmation.
Yeah.
It was real weird. I've never seen a deer like it. Probably never will see another one like
What do you
it.
think caused that?
I have no idea.
They say with atypical deer, a lot of that is like damage to the nerve endings during the growth process of the antlers.
Well, I know he wasn't there last year because I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you look at something like that and you're like, deformation on all the points, and it's like,
All
how
of
would
them.
that happen?
And he had another point growing like a dagger growing like 6 inches out of the back of his right main beam, which
Dang.
and he still had brow tines, but yeah, and he wasn't a deer that would like score really well,
Right.
but he was one that I was like, and he was mature.
Unique.
I mean, he was like
Yeah.
built like a brick shit house.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I'm gonna get this deer, and of course the other guys on the lease are hunting him too,
Right.
Which is fine, but I'm the one that has all the cameras
Right.
out, so I know what the deer are up to more than they do.
Sure.
But I rattled him in opening morning, and 75 yards, free-handed, click. And I'm like,
That is
surely
the worst.
you loaded the gun. And I did. It was just a misfire.
Oh, no.
There was a light. You said pimple. It was like a little dimple on there. And I pulled that round out, and I was like, unbelievable. And sure, as soon as he heard that,
Who's the manufacturer?
it was Federal.
Federal, get your shit together.
Federal Power. It was Vital Shock, I think. It was a 300 Win Mag.
Oh,
So then,
man.
I eject it and look at it, and the deer's at this point long gone. And I immediately go over to the range and shoot the same bullet. It fires.
Yeah.
So and it's fired every time since then.
Oh, no.
So I don't know. Who knows if I didn't have the bolt slam shut. But if you strike the
AR platform?
no, it was a Mossberg Patriot.
Yeah.
300 Win Mag.
Yeah.
I've killed a lot of
odd.
stuff with
Yeah.
that gun, and
Yeah.
never had that happen before or
I
since.
do know it's the worst feeling in the world when you're about to shoot something and you get that dead click. And
Dude.
it's
It happens more on ARs, but
It's
I
happened
don't
to me.
expect it to happen with a bolt gun.
the only time it's happened to me is while I was running an AR and dumbass didn't charge the AR in the truck before I got out to go hunt pigs. And so on the way, I'm like, I'm going to try and be quiet and, shut the bolt quietly, just give a little bit of resistance. I think it's enough, but get out there to the pigs and you're got one lined up, click, and
Yeah.
you're like, shit.
Oh, yeah.
There's literally nothing you can do at that point
Yeah.
except for get mad that you ruined the entire hunt.
Oh, I've been there too. Yeah.
Luckily, it
The-
seems like in both of our scenarios, we were the only ones out there, so there weren't like multiple people to piss off.
Nah. So the sits were adding up for that buck. After that, I was like, now I have this personal, wasn't a vendetta, but I've rattled this deer in now. Now I have this buck. We have this interaction.
Yeah.
So we have history.
Right.
And the neighbor shot him on this Sunday. But I mean, I sat, and to be fair, I took my kids a lot. I
Yeah.
have 3 kids my son's 8, my twin girls are 6.
Sure.
They all were in the blind with me a lot of those hunts.
Right.
The twins wouldn't come. It would just be me and my son. But I mean, it was like
Making a lot of noise.
10 or 15 different. I was out there 10 days, just me, and then probably like 5 or 6 more days with the kids.
Yeah.
And once the rut hit, he was like, you couldn't pattern him. And then
Right.
last week I was like, oh, he's coming back around.
Yeah.
And I was going to go this weekend and have my ass in that blind all weekend. And then I got a picture from the neighbor and this lady
Oh, no.
who she's a good old country gal. She always had a bigger dip in than I did. So yeah, she shot him and I was happy for her. My son Henry cried when I showed him the picture.
yeah,
He's like,
I bet.
Dad, you're not going to get freaky. I was like, Henry, it's a low fence deal, man. This is how hunting goes. We
Yep.
should just be happy for Caroline. She shot the deer. Her and I shared pictures of him.
Yeah.
So we had a friendly relationship.
Yeah.
And I'm if someone had to shoot her, I'm glad it was her.
Right.
Almost more so than the other guys on my lease.
Yeah, absolutely. So your lease is low fence then?
Uh-huh.
The surrounding neighbors get sometime their pick of the migrating deer.
Yeah.
Well, that's how my property is now, and I've got to explain to people, like, a lot of times it's a little different scenario for me hunting, free range, low fence, because one, I have neighbors on both sides of me, and our property is like a long, narrow stretch. We have only about 300 acres, but it's positioned very long along the Brazos River. So to pass through our property you're looking at 300-400 yards, maybe like 800 yards at the widest part of the property. That's nothing for whitetail to run through that area.
And I'm sure you're covered up in pigs because of the proximity to the river there. Because the Red River, so the lady that shot the deer, the Red River is her northern property boundary. And so for that reason, I'll go out in the springtime, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, pigs in the wheat field, just go to town.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's really unfair. I mean, we have so many pigs. So
yeah, we've got a crap ton of pigs. In fact, my county that I live in is Bosque County, and Bosque County is taking a kind of, I'll say unique. Other counties have done it, but right now they're doing a bounty on pigs. Yeah. And what they did is, in previous years, they had a trapper that they contracted out, and he was responsible for catching X amount of pigs every year.
Right.
Well, he was actually catching a lot more of like coyotes and bobcats and stuff like that, and the pig population was not being slowed down. So they cut him, and they're taking those funds that they paid him, and they're saying, look, local hunters here in Bosque County, bring us pigtails. We'll give you $10 a tail.
Oh, wow.
$10 a tail. And now I found out, I'm like, oh, hell yeah, I start cutting tails, right? And I've probably got like 17 pigtails or so in my freezer right now. So you're looking at about $170. I got a buddy of mine that's got like 300 stacked up. So he's already like, he's looking at a new Pulsar unit.
Well, he needs to go ahead and like redeem those because those funds are not, I've found like they're not unlimited.
Right,
so.
Exactly. Well, I found out afterwards, and same thing with like all the rednecks in the area, is like they're not just letting anybody do that. It's a whole thing. You got to go attend a conservation course.
Oh,
You have to, there's 2 classes I think you got to take, and then a registry. And then after that, they only accept pigtails like 1 day a month on a certain day at a certain time.
Well, it still might be worth it for your buddy. I don't know if all of that time is worth it for the 17 that you have, but
no. Well, even at the 7, well, I just started. I just started like a couple of weeks ago because I just found out about it. I don't know how long it's been going on, but nobody's told me. In fact, I will shoot pigs, and I'll normally cut it depending on how the pig goes down. I'm one of those that just believes like if the pig drops immediately, that thing's worth eating. If it runs and gets some of that adrenaline in its blood, I'm probably not touching him. Probably gonna let him lay. Depending on how the pig goes down, I'm one of those like I might cut out the straps and then toss the rest. And I found out I went by a pile of pigs one time that was on my property, in the woods, but somewhat close to a highway that runs by. Somebody had stopped, got out of their car, went into our property, and snipped the tails off the pigs.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like,
that's ballsy.
I'm like, why the hell would somebody do that? Like, you can go in and cut the tails. And then I found out the week later, they're like, oh, yeah, it's $10 a tail. I'm like, son of a bitch. It was probably my friend who's got like 300 of them stacked up now. Because it was probably somebody that knew me. I mean, it's pretty ballsy to jump a fence and, go do that. Mm-hmm. But, back to like low fence hunting on whitetail. I mean, it's a struggle for me because for the last, my entire time hunting has kind of been like, if you see a decent mainframe 8-point, he won't be alive tomorrow.
Right.
Like a lot of people are like, well, let that deer walk. And when he's 4 or 5, he's going to be amazing and like shoot him then. It's like, yes, if you get your neighbors on board with the same thing. The problem comes into play where your neighbors have got grandkids coming out to hunt, and nieces and nephews coming out to hunt, and they're literally shooting anything that walks by. And it's a real struggle for me. I've got pictures of deer on the camera that I'm like, I would love to keep them, but I might get one picture of them and then never see them again.
Yeah.
And it's like, I know that they went next door and got shot. Both of my feeders run corn all year round. I do too. We're feeding them all year round. We have a really good pattern for how they travel. But it's like when you sit in the deer stand, I'll hear my neighbor's feeder go off, my feeder will go off, and then my other neighbor's feeder will go off. And I'm like, Shit, whatever walks out today is gonna be dropped, you know?
We have quite a few young 8 points, and it's one of those things where it's bad for business for me not to shoot a deer.
Yeah.
Like it is. Like our sponsors want to see, this is what you do for a living. But I'm not going to shoot a small deer.
Right.
So if I don't shoot a buck this year, I'll shoot some does. But I mean, I've put in the time, that's for sure. Just went to South Texas this last weekend.
Yeah.
That was for my son. See what being a good dad gets you? It lets get your neighbor shooting your buck while you're out dicking around with your kid trying to get him his first buck. So
yeah. Absolutely.
But I wouldn't change it for the world. We saw a management 8 point.
Yeah.
It was, my buddy had given me pictures. This is on 1,100 acres around Encinal, all low fence. And it was real foggy the first morning, and that buck comes out. I'm like, I think that's the deer, but dang it, he's wide. Like, it's like, does my buddy really want me to let my kid shoot that deer?
Right.
So I'm like, I call him. I'm like, Chisholm, this is what I'm looking at. Are you sure this is what you want? Like, my son really shoot this deer?
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, that's a management buck in South Texas.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And then by that time, I told Henry to get on him. He's broadside, and then a doe walked in front of him.
Yeah.
And there was no shot, and then the deer turned and walked out of our lives.
Yeah.
I was like, we're not doing Texas heart shots at 8 years old.
Right.
I've never Texas heart shot a deer.
I haven't either. Yeah. I've always I've had opportunities to, but I'm like,
when the pigs start running, I sometimes don't know where it hits them. I'm just trying to shoot it in the pig.
Yeah, that's a different thing. Yeah. I don't know.
But
I struggle internally with that too, because I've had some opportunities where they're just walking away from me, and I'm like, I could do it, but
the worst part about the neighbor shooting that deer isn't that she shot it. It's that now I don't have anything to look forward to at the deer lease, because it's all young deer. I'm just like I said, I'm not going to shoot them. And it's a weird thing, because I've never had this happen where my target buck got shot by the neighbor.
Yeah.
Now the most disappointing thing is checking trail cameras.
Yeah.
They update my phone all the time.
Yeah.
I'm like, what's the point? He's not even there. So it's like, it's like part of me is like gone.
Yeah.
Part of deer season got stripped away, but
you never know what you're gonna see, man.
You don't.
The rut brings some new ones around occasionally, and maybe they break their patterns and stick around.
We had a couple mature ones disappear, like when the rut came, and they haven't been back. So they either got shot or they'll come back, and they're like, we know where the buffet is. So
2 years ago on our place, my cousin, who also lives on the farm, he shot an 18 point with drop tines and everything like that, free range, low fence deer. Biggest deer that we've seen on our place by far, and it was amazing. And he shot that deer and sent pictures around to all his buddies, and within 24 hours he got contacted by the neighbor of ours across the river, and where we're at on the Brazos is a pretty low point. He shot that deer, I think it was like Halloween day. It was like October 30th or something, 31st. He got contacted by the neighbor, and the neighbor was like, hey man, can I come over and just see this deer? He's like, you won't believe it, but I have had this deer on camera all year, and I've been feeding him all year, and I've been anticipating him at my feeder all year. And the opening day of bow season, he crawled up into his tree, fell out, and broke his arm.
Oh my gosh.
He fell out and broke his arm and was not able to hunt. And so then my buddy, the deer wandered across the river to our place and got shot by my cousin. And that guy was just... It sounds like the same situation. He wasn't mad at him, but he was just emotionally devastated.
I think we all need to be happy for other hunters when they find success. Being bitter about it, like that lady's been nothing but nice to me.
Right.
And I love talking to her.
Right.
And she lives out there, so she knows. Like there was another deer we had on camera, which he's called Ghost because he disappeared October 30th. And when I say it wasn't any deer, it was a 170-inch buck.
Yeah.
All day. It was wide, it had mass, it had all the tine length, and dude, that deer disappeared October 30th. And so I really wanted to talk to Caroline and get to know her to see if they were getting pictures of that deer.
Right, yeah.
They'd never seen that deer. Ever.
Man, no kidding.
No, and no one to our other side. Everything else has been like clear cut for agriculture, grazing and stuff. So we hold a lot of the animals.
Somebody's seen that deer. Somebody's like, we haven't seen him.
He was there last year.
Hanging in the cooler.
And he exploded. He was about a 140 last year. And I thought he was like, the pictures I had of him were from the rut.
Yeah.
And so I thought he was like old and like kind of on the downhill.
Right.
I would have shot him last year if I'd have seen him. I got late September, all through October, but dude, he just put on about 40 inches. Well, at least 30 inches.
Yeah.
He was the low 140s. He's in the 170s now. But I don't know what happened to that buck. I'm hoping that I just check my cameras and there's the ghost again.
Oh, man.
But
Yeah, that would be cool. Yeah, that's weird when they just disappear and all the neighbors are kind of like,
But the Caroline, the girl that shot the freak, she was like, if that deer would have gotten shot, I would know about it. Someone would have, kind of like the guy across the neighbor, or you're the one your cousin shot.
Yeah.
The guy across the
Word
river.
gets around.
Yeah, and it's there's a lot of land, few landowners right there.
Right.
So somebody would have said something or sent a picture,
Sure, yeah.
But the fact that she didn't have any pictures of him, but she had a lot of pictures of the other deer we were after. I mean, that deer just disappeared. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I want to talk about today, and I don't know if you can give any insight on this or not. One of the questions that I was getting from some people that listen to the show is, for those that are really interested in hunting and really love and enjoy the lifestyle, but don't have the same opportunities as far as like access to land and stuff like that. One of the things that people have to do in some cases is like prospect out owned property and actually ask permission to hunt there. Personally, I've never had to do it, so I couldn't speak to it much. Have you ever had to do anything like that where you've seeked out property?
I have. I mean, I've leased land all over the place.
Yeah.
Had a lease in Oklahoma for years, and now I have. Last year I had the deer lease and I had a duck lease, and but there have been times where like I'm done duck hunting. I used to hunt Ray Roberts all the time when I was going to school at North Texas. It was like 15 minutes from my door. Yeah. And there was this old lady, and when I say old, like she was in her 90s. Yeah. And she had a farm pond, a stock tank, on that you could see from the road. Yeah. You could see if there were ducks on it. Right. And so I would knock on her door and be like, "Can I jump your tank?" Yeah. And she'd be like, "Just don't shoot my cows." So
she was cool with it.
Yeah, she was all about it. She was like, "Yeah," and she was like, "And I'll have one of them ducks too." Yeah. So I was like, "Yes, ma'am."
Did you have a relationship with her prior to that conversation?
No, I just knocked on her door random. I didn't know who was going to answer, and it was this sweet old lady, and here's this redneck and waiters and stuff being like knocking on her door.
Right, exactly.
So
she knew what you were probably going to ask.
Yeah, but this was, this is 12, 15 years ago. Yeah. She's long dead now. Yeah. But I think it's changed. It started changing probably 30 years ago when whitetail got like hunting big whitetail bucks started to get popular. Right. Like managing them. Yeah. And now you've seen it, like it just keeps evolving, and it's very hard now. Yeah. To get free access. Right. There are there's places in the Dakotas. Like I have buddies that go pheasant hunting. They do a lot of knocking on doors. Yeah. Half the time they say yes, half the time they say no.
Well, that's the thing. I mean,
here though, it's very difficult.
Well, here it's very difficult. Yeah, a lot of landowners now, especially, are kind of shutting that conversation down. But the reality is, if you are interested in hunting, and let's say you've got no budget for a lease, but you do have access to some neighbors that have some property, it happens more often with like ducks.
Oh, sure.
Something that's quick set up, and like you don't have to make any adjustments to their property. Let's say like deer hunting, you might want to put up a stand and a feeder and stuff.
Oh, for sure.
Those things are going to lead to more no's versus just like jumping a pond where you're in and out and there's not really much set up.
I think bird hunting, dove, ducks, pheasant, quail, like you could go out to the Panhandle in Texas and get access for pheasant. Yeah. Why? Because the pheasant population in Texas isn't that great. Right. So the landowner's not going to get a lot of money out of that anyway. Right. But let's be honest, money's money and everybody wants it. Right. And so if they can turn $1 off their land, then they're going to do it. And this is an interesting conversation. People like the guys we're talking about right now, they don't have any means. Okay. And that's unfortunate. Right. And we want them to hunt. I want everybody to hunt. Sure. I want it, but if you go in and you're having this attitude of landowners are so greedy, and I'm not a landowner. Right. Wish I was. You're lucky. Your family has land. Sure. Landowners are so greedy. They won't let me. They bitch about all these hogs that are tearing up their place, but then they won't let me come on and shoot them.
Exactly. Yep.
Well, listen, buddy, you're not doing them a favor if you're going out there on Friday night drinking beer, rutting up their roads, and maybe shooting one pig. Yep. Now, if you get a bunch of guys in there with thermals, the latest Pulsar units, or if you're a trapper and you can trap 20 hogs in a night, or if you're aerial gunning out of a helicopter, those are the only 3 ways to control feral hogs. The only 3. Yeah. And unless you're offering that service to the landowner,
There's no value in it.
There's no value for them.
Right.
You shoot one pig. What does that do for them?
You're offering your leisure time.
Right.
For
liability for them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and that's the big thing. People don't understand that when you are asking property owners for this stuff, there's a liability aspect because if you get hurt on their property, there are people out there who would take advantage of that.
New thing on our deer lease this year, our landowner, if you bring a guest out, they have to sign a liability waiver.
Well,
so
I mean, unfortunately, that's the world we live in now. But I would say, yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
There's a lot of people who take advantage of that.
So I would say, try to find public land. There's, tons of opportunity, especially for bow hunting, pigs. Like WMAs around here. There's quite a few of them with opportunity for that.
You bow hunt a lot?
So I'm just an equal opportunity hunter.
Okay.
I bow hunt during bow season.
Yeah.
And if I haven't killed my buck, then I pick up the rifle.
That's what I did this year.
I love it. My favorite thing to hunt in the world is archery elk.
Yeah.
But that's 1 week. I'm a Texan. I get 1 week away from, where I can block out that time in the calendar to leave the family and go do that. If I lived, and I would never leave Texas for so many reasons, but I am jealous of the Western guys that have a trailhead 15 minutes from their house.
Right.
It's like, well, okay, we're going to go elk hunt one afternoon.
Right.
What? You're going elk hunting for an afternoon?
For me, that's like a 3-day adventure.
Yeah. So.
So I started bow hunting this year, and I had shot bows previously, but I never really got like super into bow hunting. And part of that was just financially. I was more invested in rifles and things of that nature. But then I decided this year, I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm going to pick up bow hunting. And I went out and got me a Hoyt bow, all decked out. I got the freaking nice drop sight on there, which I think is a freaking waste of money. But to me, it's like $250 for this little sight that drops down out of the way. It's supposed to be so amazing. I'm like, I shot a whisker biscuit for years without any issues. So whatever. I've got it. And it looks real fancy, but I'll tell you, I set out in the stand.
Is it like a QAD?
No.
Drop away rest?
Yeah, it's just a drop. It's just a drop away rest. I think it's made specifically for Hoyt, but I think they make one for Matthews too. I think it started off with Matthews, and they made one for Hoyt. But I'm setting out, man, in my stand, and I will tell you, I did the same thing you did, which is I hunted bow during bow season, and then when rifle season started, I pulled out the rifle. But my story for my bow season, how it went, unsuccessful, I will admit, which I was cocky going into it this year. I was like, oh, yeah, I can do that, it's not that big.
Oh, bow hunting will humble you faster than just about anything else.
I was like, oh, what's so hard about it? I can do it, Man, I took one shot this bow season, the early season, and it was at a doe that probably wanted to be shot. We had this doe on camera that I have seen wandering around my property with 3 legs.
Oh, wow.
She's missing an entire front leg. And I don't know if it was a birth defect or she survived an attack of something like that. But now she's actually getting around. And there's not a visible, open wound on her side. So it's something that's happened, within past years. Or maybe she was born that way. I don't know. But she's 3 legs. So I pinned her immediately, and I was like, I want to shoot her this year. Sure enough, I'm sitting out in the stand, and she comes hobbling out, right? And she's eating at my feeder, standing broadside from me from about 20 yards away. And I'm like, oh, my God, it's perfect. Like, everything about this is perfect. I drew back the bow. I had her lined up. I shot about an inch over her back, which was devastating to me because I had been on target all year.
You were feeling cocky before that.
Yeah, exactly. I was cocky. I was like, shit, I just missed. Are you kidding me? Dude, I had not, and maybe call me out if this is bullshit. I had not shot out of my stand, which was 8 to 10 foot off the ground. I've been shooting flat-footed on the ground at a target, and I had not actually physically shot out of my stand. And I'm feeling like that kind of screwed some stuff up for me, but it could have been that I just sucked too, and I got nervous.
No, I think you definitely need to, it doesn't have to be that stand, but you need to shoot from an elevated position.
Yeah.
Like I've shot off of the roof of my house plenty of times.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't do any of that. So
the neighbors kind of were like, "What's that guy doing up there?"
So this is
that's just Cable doing his redneck shit that he does. He keeps bringing me deer meat. I'm not gonna say anything.
This is how big of a dumbass I was. I'm sitting there and I shoot and I miss an inch high, and she she's 3-legged, so it's not like she ran off. She hobbled off in her.
And she didn't duck your arrow on 3 legs.
No, just a bad shot. And she goes about 10 yards, stops and turns around, and I'm like, shit. I only brought one freaking arrow. Like,
rookie mistake. Yeah.
Yeah, one arrow. And I'm thinking like the whole time previous, I'm like, I'm going to have one shot. I only take one arrow. And I'm setting up there. And at this point, she knows I'm there. I just shot at her. She went 10 yards, stopped and turned around. It was almost like a, come on, buddy, take another shot. Like, here's broadside right
I'm
here.
ready. I'm ready.
Hit me right here.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, fuck, I'm sorry. I only brought the one arrow. And she's like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, I'm trying to help you out here. She hobbles back over to the feeder and starts eating.
Oh,
I'm like,
taunting you.
I'm sitting here for the next 20 minutes just watching her. She's like, I swear, at one point in time, she walked over to the arrow that was in the ground that I had just shot at her and just tried to fall on it. Like, she was trying. She's like, buddy, just get down with a knife and come take care of it, please.
No, you've always got to have your quiver. But, this is our journey as hunters is we learn from those mistakes. Like, you'll never do that again.
Nope.
So I've done plenty of dumb stuff, especially bow hunting, just like opportunities that, what you can't, things you can't take back, words and arrows.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's very true. We'll switch gears a little bit here. I want to talk to you about night hunting. One of the things that a lot of people ask me, digital optics are increasing in popularity, whether it's digital night vision or thermal rifle scopes. But one of the things that I see as a constant is that people have no idea what they're talking about. The general public.
Right.
You talk about somebody who grew up on granddad's hand-me-down rifles and stuff like that. That guy is going to refer to everything as night vision. And it's one of the biggest things.
Oh, yeah, they do, for sure.
I have people come to me all the time. They're like, hey, man, what do you think? Could I get some night vision for, $600, $500? I'm like, yeah, we could probably do that. And send them out a product, and they're like, hey, this isn't what I was talking about. I'm looking for that thing that shows heat. And I'm like, look, dude, you're not talking about night vision.
Yeah.
Like, you're talking about thermal. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about were just the differences in the two and why someone might prefer one over the other. I mean, obviously, most people are going to lean thermal if they can afford it. But night vision does have its upsides. For me, like identification, and let's say if you're just like, I don't know, prospecting deer, for instance. I mean, it's deer season right now, and I've had the opportunity where I'm out pig hunting and there's been a herd of deer, and I just peek, just to see what's out there and try to scope out like, oh, this big buck's coming out. Maybe he'll be at my feeder in the morning. You know what I mean? Yeah. We're not taking shots at him, but things like antlers and stuff like that tend to not show up as well on like thermal units.
Well, I don't know. Some of the latest, the Thermion. Especially in velvet, I mean, you could see everything.
In velvet, they shine. Shine like a diamond.
Well, and it also just depends on how close they are. Like, if you're within 100 yards, you could probably make out with thermal what a hard antlered buck looks like. Yeah. But night vision, it's totally different. I mean, you're just seeing exactly what the animal looks like. Right. Not a heat signature of it.
It's similar to like somebody just shining a flashlight out there for you, basically.
I'll be honest though, I haven't hunted with night vision in 5 or 6 years. Yeah. All thermal.
Did you take the gradual steps up?
I did. So I've been with Pulsar for, I don't know, 8 or 9 years. Yeah. And I had like I think it was a Digisight maybe. Yeah. Back in the day. Yeah. That was the first night optic that I had. Yeah. And so that's loved it.
The Digisight's a digital night vision rifle scope.
Yeah. And that was a long time ago. Yeah. Do we still even make those? I don't know. It isn't like an intentional thing. If Pulsar sent me a night vision scope, I'd use that too. Yeah. But right now I've just been running. Well, it seems like the trails and then the Thermion, and I love that stuff. So I'm just like, for me, I like the detection range the most. So I mean, we have those wheat fields at our deer lease that I was telling you about, and it's like you could see 1,000 yards easy.
I mean, you can detect up to 2,000 yards now with the current models. I mean,
and I have the Helion 2.0 monocular. Okay. So, I've got the latest and greatest.
That's about the best setup. Generally, you took the same progression that it seems like most people have. And when those guys contact me and they're like, "Hey, can I get some night vision for like $600?" and my answer is yes, you can. Yeah. And then their response is, "Well, this isn't what I was talking about." I was like, "Look, buddy, you're asking me about $600. Right. Like, you're gonna need to take a progression, run this digital night vision for a little bit, and it's gonna get the job done. You're gonna like it." But then once you decide you want to step up a little bit and maybe get into the thermal game, then we can have another discussion. But you're looking at a significant price difference between the two.
Well, and the cool thing though is these units on the high end thermals, the prices come down. And let's just say the decade-ish I've been with Pulsar, like they used to be $6,000. Now you can get one for $2,500, $3,000. So the demand has increased and the price has gone down. You don't always see that combination.
Well, the market has become, I don't want to say overly saturated, but there's a lot more competitors. There's a lot more competitors now than there was, let's say, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And those things kind of dictate market price as well. So yeah, the prices come down significantly, and
it's still let's not BS. It's still very expensive.
Well, here's the deal. I mean,
but if you want it bad enough,
whenever I talk to people about buying these and making that investment, I say, look, honestly, how often do you think you're going to go out and use it? Right? Because if you go out 2 times a year, don't buy it.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, if
book a hunt with 3 Curl or somebody and use their stuff.
Exactly. You can use their stuff, have a great experience, and just get it done that way. You don't have to own this thing. But if you're a guy who goes out 3-4 times a week, you will definitely get your money's worth out of this. But also, like, they tend to not depreciate in value that much. So it's something that you could get your money back out of pretty easily, most of your money back out of pretty easily if you ever decided, like, I'm not using this thing quite enough.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I don't know. I've never sold one. So
why would you?
Yeah, it's mine.
So you're talking about 3 Curl. Do you go out to hunt with those guys very often?
Yeah, so before I started doing this for a living, Brett, one of the founders of 3 Curl, and I were just duck hunting buddies.
Oh,
so really? we go back a long time, and they advertise a little bit with me, and I send them a lot of business.
Very nice.
And so they invite me on some hunts for that reason.
I see.
Plus, they're just good dudes. We all get along, and we like hanging out.
I shout out, hey Brandon, when we did that, we just did a range shoot out there. That was at 3 Curl's place, wasn't it? Or it was a place. It was a range that, it was owned by. Yeah.
Oh yeah. That's their new. Yeah.
Yeah.
That lodge is nice. We stayed
went out
there.
To the lodge, man.
Yeah.
That was pretty sweet.
Yeah.
That was a nice setup they got out there.
My son and Brett's son, Bryce, are the same age.
Yeah.
And so they get along pretty good. And
there you go.
We went out there last duck season, and they had just finished the lodge, and we ordered I think it might have been the Conor McGregor fight or something.
Yeah.
And, we had a good time, and then went and shot a limit of ducks in the morning. So
well, I've seen several pictures that have came back from pig hunts with them, and they're stacking them up. I mean, 20, 30 pigs.
Yeah, and you have to take into account that most of the guys that are going hunting with them are going with them because they don't have their own thermals,
right.
And they might not be the best shots. So if they're stacking up 20 or 30, that tells you how many pigs they have.
Yeah, absolutely. I know they've got a lot. But speaking of not having their own thermals, this goes into like not having your own gear. There's a lot of, I say there's a lot. I know of at least 2 outfitters, and I won't mention who they are, but they have actually turned away people who showed up to hunt without suppressors.
Yeah.
Now, when you're hunting pigs, or let's say just hunting nighttime at all, is not having suppressors, is that a deal breaker for you?
No. I, for the longest time, didn't have I still don't have one on my ARs.
Yeah.
I do have a suppressor now, but I run it on my bolt gun.
Yeah.
And which is what my trail's on. I have the trail on a 6.5 Creedmoor. Creed Nation.
Yeah.
Which I love to make fun of. Creed
Lovely
Nation.
$3.50 a round right now.
Yeah, but I like the 6.5 Creedmoor for coyotes and pigs. I don't go deer hunting with it.
Yeah.
People shoot up to an elk with it. That's not me. I have a 300 Win Mag, 7 Mag, 270.
Yeah.
I like those for bigger game, but yeah, for pigs and coyotes, love that thing. But I've only had the suppressor for 6 to 8 months, something like that. I should have done it a long time ago, but I was afraid Obama was going to be like tracking me, and he never did anything. But yeah, I waited, and then like 10 years later, I'm like, why am I still waiting to do this?
Right, exactly. Just get it over with.
Yeah.
Well, the reason I brought it up is because there were instances that I know of, people I know personally, who showed up to hunt with an outfitter with their rifle, and they were like, oh, you don't have a suppressor? You're not riding tonight.
Yeah.
And to me, I'm like, man, how many people can you turn away before, like the night of.
Well,
'cause
you
they
should be
show up.
offering them a gun with a suppressor.
Exactly.
Then, so.
Like most outfitters would be like, "Oh, you don't have a suppressor? What are you running? 223? Okay, I've got one."
Well, 3 Curl doesn't run suppressors on theirs.
Oh, they don't.
It's great. It's great. They have them.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're generally speaking not. And I will say this: if you're not running a suppressor and you're not wearing ear protection, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
Because I don't hear as well as I once did.
Yeah.
Like I'll be hunting turkey or elk.
Yep.
Like there's a gobble. My buddy will say this to me. Did you hear that gobble? I'm like, I didn't hear shit. Like,
No.
well, you're
what are
deaf.
talking about?
You know, like.
All I hear is a ringing. I hear a steady ring.
Well, there's been like 3 times in my life where, and one of them was with 3 Curl. The guy next to me shot. He didn't like shoot like close to my head, but you know, my ear was close enough to his muzzle blast.
Yeah.
To where like it hurt for like 3 days.
Right.
And there's been other times, and it's always been with an AR.
Yeah.
Where I haven't, and I guarantee you, I had ear protection that night and probably just forgot to pull it over my ear.
Yeah.
You know, in the thrill of sneaking up on a sounder of 30 pigs.
Right.
And man, I paid for it. So I would, and there's young people like I didn't wear that stuff when I was younger.
Right.
And people are like, oh, you don't need that. Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Or I'm 40,
Right.
and I know that my hearing is not as good as it was
Yep.
10 years ago.
I've been running a little mosquito chime the entire time you've been in here. You haven't said anything about it.
Yep.
No, that's absolutely true.
My wife's like, are you like toning me out? Like, what are you? We're riding in the truck. And she's like, I'm trying to talk to you. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. I was just listening to the music. And she's like, I know, but I'm literally talking right here next. It's like, didn't hear you.
My wife gets same issues. I've made mistakes a few times in the spur of the moment where I didn't put my ear protection on. So I also have had issues with that. And now I'm a big advocate for it. Like, hey, make sure and wear some ears, like, because you don't want what's going on in my ears right now.
No,
like,
it's terrible.
You know, but
and you need that. You need your hearing to hunt, like to be a good hunter.
You need your hearing to maintain a relationship.
My
wife gets.
I don't know
pissed
about
off.
that. Like
My
sometimes
wife
I'm
would be
glad. She's giving me an earful. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
My
That's
wife will
probably
be
for the
talking to
best.
me, and she'll be like in the kitchen or something. I'm in the bedroom, and I'll walk in. She'll be like, "What do you think?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she's like, "What did I say?" And I'm like, "I couldn't hear you." You know. And she's like, "Why would you even respond to my question if you couldn't hear me?" And I'm like, "Look, if we're not in the same room and you're not looking at me,
Yeah.
I can't hear you." Like,
I think part of that is also just being a guy. Like,
Yeah, that's true.
you know. But
selective hearing.
yeah.
Oh, new gun? Yeah, we can do that. I
Yeah.
heard that from the next state.
Yeah.
That segues us into what I wanted to talk to you about, which is kind of more on some legislative side of things. Texas, within the last couple of months, has passed the Texas Suppressor Freedom Act. I don't remember what the actual bill's called, what the bill number was, but essentially what they're saying is local authorities will no longer be looking for certain paperwork on Texas-made suppressors, and those suppressors have to meet certain requirements, be made in Texas with Texas-sourced materials. Frankly, there's not a ton of that out there. People have started saying, like, oh, well, that would apply to mine if I make it on my own, or, you know, X, Y, and Z. My question to you is, if you're looking at this at face value, does it seem like legitimate legislation, or is it like feel-good policy for, you know, voting purposes?
So I was really excited when this came out, and I had Tom Oliverson. He's a congressman from Houston area.
Yeah.
I think Cypress to be exact. So I had him on the show. This is one of my most listened to podcasts of this year.
Yeah.
And I was all excited thinking, you know, Texas is like giving the middle finger to the feds. And,
Yeah.
and the comparison is like, okay, marijuana is still federally illegal, but
Yep.
Colorado, California, Washington, there's states that don't enforce that law.
Right.
So that was the premise of this. Like, okay, let's see if the ATF has the balls to come enforce this,
Right.
and if they have the stomach for that fight. Well, the first thing the ATF did was send a letter to all the firearm manufacturers, Texas-based,
Yeah.
and and there are a few that make suppressors in Texas. Send a letter to all of them saying, if we catch you doing this, you will lose your license.
Right.
So, you know, you can't risk that.
That's the reality. A lot of people that are going to be listening to the show or watching it.
We need a guinea pig, someone out there that has more money than they know what to do with, that makes guns for fun, to just say, fuck you, I'm going to try it.
See what happens.
Come get
first.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah, see what happens.
Well, the reality is if you're watching or listening to the show, the chances are you're thinking of this law from a consumer standpoint, which is if you bought a suppressor, what would happen to you? And the reality is probably nothing.
Mm-hmm.
The ATF really doesn't give a damn about the one guy who bought a suppressor at some point in time. What they're looking at are the manufacturers who are doing this, because the Texas law doesn't skirt any federal laws. It's just saying we're not going to enforce it.
Right.
But the reality is all of these dealers, if they're a licensed FFL dealer, they have to keep a log of the suppressors that they sell, and those suppressors have to be sent to the ATF or...
Yeah, but that bill essentially said you no longer have to log that.
Yeah.
But are they willing to risk it? Because, like, again, it's your livelihood.
The answer so far has been no.
No, I don't know of anyone that has done it.
No. F1 firearms here in Texas, they're not doing it. And they were going to be my primary, so I was going to be like, oh, hell, we'll hit F1 up for some suppressors. And it's like, not the case. So
it's weird. Like, South Africa, it's harder to get a gun than it is a suppressor.
Right.
New Zealand, you can just walk into a store and just buy a suppressor.
Walk into the supermarket and buy one for $100.
So, I think it is kind of crazy that in the country with the most guns, we have these really strict suppressor laws, and most mass shootings aren't done with suppressors anyway. So it's just,
the definition of a firearm has to change, because the definition today, as it's written, includes suppressors. Like they say a suppressor, the can that goes on the end of the barrel, is classified as a firearm, which is why it has to be stamped and taxed.
That's an antiquated law that's been on the books since, I think, the Great Depression era.
And it's insane.
Era. Yeah.
It's insane. I mean, it's not a firearm. It's an accessory to a
firearm.
Right. But until that definition changes, which I don't know if it ever will, it's going to continue to be a struggle. But like you said, we can go to different countries, and you can't bring them back with you. But while you're there, most guys are going, drop $100 at the supermarket, pick out a suppressor, and then when they leave, they just give it away to somebody. Because it's like they're unregulated. It's treated as any other type of firearm accessory. It's
I know a guy
that we have to
took his
around
to Africa with him, which our travel agent advised him not to do. I think Jeff Thomason's still with Pulsar.
No.
He doesn't care. But no, he was like, I put it in my toiletry bag and put it in my carry-on and just went to Africa with it. So
holy hell!
Yeah.
Wow, that's ballsy. Okay.
Yeah, they wanted to do. Obviously he's an amazing predator hunter, and that's what his show is all about. But they wanted to do jackals on, and it proved to be a little more difficult than they thought it was. Like the jackals didn't respond like our coyotes did. So
really,
yeah, it was hard to call them in. He said.
Why?
I didn't get a reason for that, but
just bad calling. Was he using electrical calls?
Jeff's not. I'm sure he had it. He's not a bad caller based off all the coyotes he stacks up. But
no.
I don't know. I've never. I think I've seen one jackal over there. But what another cool predator they have on the Eastern Cape is the caracal, which is like
carrot cow.
Caracal.
Caracal.
It's a lynx species, so it's like our bobcat or our
spell it. Can you spell it?
CARAC.
CAR.
Yeah, ACAL. Caracal. And the ear tufts on this thing are so cool. So I ended up getting one with
it looks kinda like a lynx.
Yeah, we hunt them with hounds
and cool.
Put one up a tree, and ended up taking it. It wasn't that big of a caracal, and so they caught one in a trap. These things are hell on like bush buck fawns.
Holy hell, it's pretty big.
Yeah,
wow,
it's a nice sized cat, and they don't like them. They trap them, they hunt them. So got a big male in a trap, and that's the one I'm getting mounted.
Nice. Yeah, I think it's absolutely crazy that we have to jump through all these hoops over here just for a definition purpose that should have been changed a long time ago.
And then the time frame, dude. Like, you buy this thing, and then you're lucky if you have it within that same year. Like,
oh yeah,
I got mine in 6 months. I was amazed. I could not believe it.
6 months is awesome. I just heard, and again, this is all hearsay. I had heard that there was just legislation passed that was supposed to expedite a lot of that and make it a little bit faster. So hopefully we see that changing.
Would doubt that's true because the Biden administration has nothing, no good intentions for firearms, certainly not for suppressors. The appropriations bill that is basically planning the fiscal budget for the next year is sitting there right now. And there's some language in there pertaining to trophy hunting that is very concerning.
Yeah.
And it's not that they're saying we're banning trophy hunting overseas like international hunting.
Tax the shit out of it.
It's that they're saying we will not be funding, the U.S. government will not fund the people here that are supposed to expedite those trophies.
Oh, yeah.
We're just doing away with that position.
Right.
So they're skirting the deal.
Right.
And it's basically saying no more trophy importation from foreign countries because we're not saying it's illegal. We're not banning it, but we're not funding it. Well, okay, you're the one that has to do the job.
Right.
If you don't fund it, then it doesn't happen.
Damn.
So that hasn't been decided yet, but it's kind of concerning. So
that's crazy. Yeah, I'm gonna have to look more into that because I didn't know anything about any of that.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely gonna check that out. But hey, we're running close on time, so what I'm gonna do is go ahead and cut us off here. But I want to thank you for coming in and spending some time with us.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Meet you. Give yourself one last plug. I mean, where can people find your stuff?
LoneStarOutdoorsShow.com, and then the podcast is all over Spotify, Apple, wherever you consume your podcasts. We'll be there.
Awesome.
So yeah,
Cool, man.
And then Instagram, I'm still there.
You're still on Instagram.
Probably not for much longer.
By the time this airs,
it might be a thing of the past. But yeah, you can just find Lonestar Outdoors Show on the social media outlets as well.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, thanks a lot, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yep.